Hello again to another Agakala Reacts, and today we'll be watching Why Does This Forest Look Like a Fingerprint from Vox. It's another Vox video. I really enjoy Vox videos, they're really well made. They cater to my interests, let's say. And let's just jump in and see why does forests look like fingerprints.
I'm in the middle of the countryside in Uruguay, trying to find this. A forest shaped like a fingerprint. We're here because of a screenshot of Google Earth that somebody posted to Reddit.
It's very
In
interesting.
2022, a Reddit user named Tarek619 found strange DNA-like forests spanning some 30 kilometers in Uruguay. I looked at the forest. I wasn't totally sure what was DNA-like about it, but it was strange. And then I zoomed out and saw that it was just part of a whole array of forests, all in mesmerizing designs. Then I zoomed out more. Forests like this covered the entire country, but I couldn't stop looking at this one. It looked like a fingerprint.
From
From street view, I could just barely make out what it was. Long rows of identical trees. If I wanted to see inside one of these forests, I would have to go see it for myself. So I went and discovered something much more complex than I expected. But it all started with one question. Why did this forest look like a fingerprint?
Oh, the suspense, guys, the suspense.
Before I left, I started with some highly advanced research methods. And I started reading. According to a Uruguayan government report, about 1 million of Uruguay's 17 million hectares of land are covered with pine and eucalyptus plantations.
Oh.
Tree farms. Artificial forests. That's why they were planted in these rows of identical trees.
Why?
Reading more, I learned that the majority of those trees are turned into pulp. Not pulp like orange juice, pulp like wood pulp. Soft, wet, chemically separated cellulose that becomes the main ingredient in making paper products. Printing paper, paper towels, toilet paper, napkins, anything. And according to the very first result on Google search, these forests were a miracle. On a continent devastated by deforestation, Uruguay was one of the few countries where forest cover had actually expanded. It sounded like a massive accomplishment. These strikingly arranged forests appeared to be part of some nationwide project. If it really was a miracle, I had to see it.
After 3 flights to Miami and then to Lima, I've finally made it to Montevideo. I am sitting in traffic right now waiting to pick up Faustina Bartaburu. Hey, how's it going? She's a journalist based here in Montevideo. I'll be there in like 5 minutes.
Between finding the forests on Google Earth and coming here, I'd connected with her to help us find experts in Uruguay.
Hi.
Experts who could help us learn more about the forests. Starting with a representative from the forestry industry.
La industria forestal uruguaya, como tal, funciona por lo que, o bajo el modelo de lo que se conoce afforestation.
That's afforestation, not reforestation, where trees are restored to a depleted forest, but where trees are planted in a place where no trees existed before.
En el caso de Uruguay, la ley que dio mayor impulso a la producción forestal es la que denominamos Segunda Ley Forestal del año 1988.
Just 40 years ago, these forests weren't here at all. In 1987, the Uruguayan government passed a law that protected the country's native forests, but also declared a national interest in developing new forestry resources, forestry industries, and a forestry economy. The law set the stage for a boom for the forestry industry. All over the country, the transformation was dramatic.
Wow.
Today, Uruguay has more plantation forest cover than native forest cover, and the country's wood pulp industry employs thousands of people. Wood pulp has become Uruguay's second biggest export, totaling over $2 billion in 2023, and it's on the verge of becoming the biggest. Uruguay created an industry that has radically reshaped the country's landscape, but also its economy.
But why is it shaped like that?
Claro que esto genera una mejor situación en el balance nacional, en el sentido de que por hectárea ocupada de forestación, vos tenés una mayor generación de valor agregado, de empleo, recaudación de impuestos y demás, que por la ocupación ganadera.
Obviously.
We had a basic understanding of why the forests were there, so we met up with a videographer and drone operator who would help us document the journey, and we set off to find the fingerprint. We're just about an hour north of Montevideo right now, and you can already start to see all of these plantations dotting the horizon.
We are on our way to try to find that fingerprint.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we don't know what it's going to look like, if it's going to look anything like the satellite image. I mean, these trees could have been cut. They could have grown in a way that, like, the pattern is kind of hard to recognize now. Anything could have changed.
I really want to like see the shapes from above.
Yeah, I've never been this excited to see some trees.
You must be getting close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's it.
Got here.
Cool. We made it.
I mean, I know it's not natural, but it seems like somehow natural. It's great. You want to see?
I do. Wow. Huh. Crazy. It's like a perfect match.
I wonder if we'll find
There it
the
was.
reason for it.
A perfect fingerprint shape, exactly like we'd seen on the internet. Made up of thousands of trees.
That's the eucalyptus trees, isn't it?
And surrounded by forest after forest in the same kind of design. But there was a problem. We wanted to go inside, and every forest we passed was completely inaccessible.
It's a lot of fences, so I think it'll be hard to get inside.
Yes.
It was frustrating. We didn't want to trespass. And after
Yeah.
traveling all this way, it wasn't clear if we'd be able to see much more than this. But then down the road, we saw a sign on one of those fences. INEA, the country's National Institute for Agricultural Research. We sent them an email asking if they could get us inside. But as we drove around the area, something else caught our eye. Wood trucks.
Well,
They were
obviously.
everywhere.
I want to get a video of every single one.
It's nothing wrong. It's a plantation. So
There's another one.
this is like they said, afforestation. So it's, and they call it plantation. Even he calls it plantation in the video. It's plantation of the trees. It's just basically for wood pulp. So there's no surprise that they're gonna be cut down and they're gonna be seeing it. I'm guessing what's happening is they cutting down and they letting the soil for a few years maybe kind of undisturbed, and then probably putting more trees in there. Because that's how the plantation works, isn't it?
There's another one.
Hundreds of trucks full of logs going one direction, empty trucks going the other direction. As the sun set, we decided to follow them.
We're gonna try to follow
That's
the
risky.
trucks that are full of trees to see where they're going.
To the wood mill? Or what's it called? Lumber mill? Lumberyard?
After driving in the dark for an hour and a half, we saw where they were going.
It's almost like a city.
We arrived in Paso de los Toros.
Probably have a paper mill there. There you go. Yeah,
It's the
looks
home
kinda
of
like
one
it.
of the biggest wood pulp mills in the world, owned by a company called UPM. They had written that first article I saw about Uruguay's forestry miracle. The construction of this mill was major national news.
La nueva
It's
planta
massive.
de UPM.
Esta segunda planta de
La
UPM.
planta que está ubicada en cercanías Paso de los Toros.
Ese gigante que está creciendo allí en el centro del país.
UPM's facility here is massive. Its size rivals that of the city of Paso de los Toros itself, a small town of 13,000 people.
Es como una ciudad. ciudad de tan grande que es.
Es lo que yo lo digo, y de noche es una ciudad, vos la ves y es una ciudad. Es una ciudad. Yo digo, pucha, qué grande que es, porque hay alumbrado, todo es una ciudad eso.
Antes de la planta, una ciudad pequeña, desconocida totalmente del mismo Uruguay.
Fernando also told us about a really specific change that had occurred in the town.
Alguien llegó un día acá, era de Brasil. Venían jugando con la familia a descubrir cosas interesantes en cada ciudad. Entonces llega y pregunta, ¿dónde está el pequeño Helsinki? Yo dije, ¿qué es el pequeño Helsinki? No sé lo que es. No, dice un barrio que hicieron así. Ah, sí.
Little Helsinki. It's a neighborhood in Paso de los Toros where high-level UPM employees live. We drove over to see it. Just a few blocks from a town that mostly looked like this were these long rows of identical homes, straight out of an architectural design magazine.
Yeah.
It's physical evidence of the ties this community has to somewhere else, somewhere very far away.
Helsinki?
Because UPM isn't from
Iceland?
Europe or from South America, but from Finland.
Finland.
UPM,
Helsinki, it's
a
in
Finnish
Finland. Oh
company,
my god,
is
that
one
was
of
terrible.
the largest landowners in
Wow.
Uruguay, owning almost 30% of Uruguay's 1.1 million hectares of forest plantations. The construction of this pulp mill was the single largest investment in the history of UPM, and the single largest foreign investment in the history of Uruguay, over $3 billion. Standing outside the mill, we could see full trucks driving in, empty trucks driving out. But we later learned that that's not all that's happening here. Because these trucks are driving out of land subject to Uruguay's normal tax laws and into a tax-free zone that the Uruguayan government set up just for this pulp mill. It's not just company property, it's an economic space the government created to stimulate forestry production. UPM is just one of several companies involved in forestry production here, but it runs 2 of the country's 3 mills for processing eucalyptus into pulp. Together, these mills turn 17 million tons of wood into 4.8 million tons of pulp every year, each within their own free trade zone. We reached out to UPM hoping to talk to someone from the company while we were in Paso de los Toros, but after a short back and forth, they stopped responding to our emails. Then, INEA got back to us. They were able to get us inside a forest. Not the fingerprint forest, but a similar plantation they use for research purposes. We hoped the visit could help us learn more about why they looked that way. We met the guide from INEA, Federico, and suited up. Vests for visibility, shin guards to protect against snakes, and helmets in case of falling debris.
I have a really big head, so this might be hard.
Okay. Then we headed inside.
It's colder here.
Yeah, you definitely notice the temperature change.
Finally, we were inside one of these forests. We'd seen them from above, and now we were seeing one up close, seeing, touching, smelling the habitat we traveled all this way to experience.
If you squeeze it, it really smells.
Yeah, definitely.
Esto es semilla, esto es fruto, esto es fruto de grandes. Las 2 especies predominantes en Uruguay, grandes y duni, son lo que usan las empresas, digamos.
These eucalyptus trees are not native to Uruguay. They're from Australia, but they grow really, really, really fast, which means that they can be planted and then harvested all within about 10 years, which, you know, sounds like a long time, but for a tree...
Tree? That's... wow! 10 years?
I just realized like there has to be so much planted because if trees grows like in 10 years,
Yeah.
and we see all those tracks plus trees, so I mean there has to be so much.
But being there still didn't explain the shapes of these forests.
Exactly.
So we sat down with Gonzalo Martinez Crosa from INEA's forestry program and asked him.
I'm curious if you can kind of describe why plantations kind of look the way they do, why they are arranged in the shapes that they are, and kind of the thinking that goes into it.
So when you plant big plants like trees, you need to take into consideration the topography of the soil.
I was thinking about...
Usually these lines of row follow the topography.
Really?
So that's why sometimes they come up with these curious patterns of growing in curves or spirals or things like that.
Huh.
Contour lines. These forests followed the curvature of the ground beneath them. Each concentric line in the fingerprint traced a slightly higher and higher level of elevation, until the incline came to a peak, right here. These forests were topographic maps, drawn with
That's
trees.
cool though.
And sometimes, the patterns that you get are very, very curious and very interesting to see from above.
So that was it. Contour lines. Mystery solved. Our job here was done.
Was it though?
But I couldn't get this one thing out of my head.
Yeah.
Something our guide had said.
¿Sabes si como esa competencia entre los árboles que por el sol, digamos, hace que sea difícil que otro tipo de especies crezcan acá? O sea, como que en las plantaciones es normal que haya solo árboles o pueden crecer otras cosas.
Sí, no, solamente no crece nada más.
Nothing else grows here. You could tell.
One of the first things I noticed is just how dead the ground is. Like, it's all eucalyptus, all the dead leaves and branches.
It's quiet.
There was nothing on the forest floor but dead leaves and fungi, no sounds except for machinery in the distance. These are monoculture tree farms, like those grown for palm oil or rubber, not natural ecosystems. If vast areas of natural grasslands had been turned into tree farms where nothing else could grow, this forestry miracle seemed more complicated than I'd expected.
I think we've all heard of deforestation. We know what that looks like. We know why it's bad. But the opposite of that, afforestation, planting a whole bunch of trees all at once, that sounds like a good thing. If deforestation is a bad thing, afforestation sounds like a good thing. I want to figure out if that's the right assumption about this.
I found Alexandra Crivino, a biologist who uses camera traps to study how afforestation changes animal populations.
Acá no hay deforestación, hay depraderización, que ni siquiera existe como un concepto, básicamente es eso. Las especies que son sumamente especialistas desaparecen de estos paisajes.
True.
Compared to grasslands, her camera traps observed fewer kinds of species in firebreaks. Those are the preserved areas of grassland in between the new forests, and even fewer in the eucalyptus plantations themselves.
Es que la gran mayoría sigue prefiriendo lo nativo porque lo nativo siempre va a ser más diverso. Uno no puede esperar que un monocultivo tan parejito realmente logre alcanzar la biodiversidad que hay en ecosistemas mucho más estructuralmente complejos. Por eso no se dice que es un bosque. Por eso no hablamos con la forestación como algo que se convirtió en un espacio boscoso nuevo.
Companies like UPM say that they keep large portions of their land uncultivated, reserved for the natural ecosystems that were there before. And UPM says it's had a system for detecting and protecting local species on its land since the early 1990s. But more and more, we were seeing that there was another side to this whole thing. Afforestation turned real grasslands into artificial forests, and that had consequences. Studies have found that afforested plantations reduce annual water yield and can make soil less fertile and more acidic. And while these trees absorb a lot of carbon while they're alive, because they're converted into single-use paper products, much of that carbon is eventually re-released into the atmosphere when the paper eventually decomposes or is burned. It made us wonder what harvesting looked like. So we followed an empty truck to see where it led. It was shocking. Hectares of bare land, stacks of logs awaiting transportation. It was a part of the process we hadn't seen yet. where after a decade of growth, the trees are cut down, taken by truck to a mill like UPM's, and turned into pulp. And now we were curious what happened next. All of that pulp has to go somewhere, and Uruguay, working with outside investors, built a huge amount of infrastructure to transport and export pulp from the new UPM plant. Starting with a new billion-dollar central railway from the mill to the port that was right about to be completed. We started to follow it south.
We're driving right behind a truck full of wood pulp, which is all the stuff that once this railroad right here alongside us is complete, will be transported in trains instead of in trucks.
The railroad led us all the way back through Montevideo, past a new $130 million viaduct for improved access to the sea, and to a $280 million port terminal just for loading truckloads of wood pulp onto ships, most of which goes to Europe and China.
So
construction work for this infrastructure was everywhere. A lot of it covered in graffiti, with messages like UPM Get Out. Because on its way to the port facility, the railroad cuts through neighborhoods, causing disruptions that have angered nearby residents.
Ferrocarril Central.
Ferrocarril Central. Es tremendo lo que va a cambiar. Generando diversos impactos de todo tipo.
Meses de obra fueron muy feos.
We're on our way right now to the neighborhood of Capurro, which is one of the places that this new train is going to go directly through.
Convivimos en el barrio con dos obras muy importantes, como lo es el ferrocarril, que nos ha partido el barrio al medio literalmente.
Solamente teníamos una vía de acceso para entrada y salida, ómnibus y todo, digo, quedamos como aislados, quedó como una isla Capurro.
Cortes de aguas permanentes, hemos tenido sin previo aviso días completos sin tener agua potable. Ahí antes había un montón de casas que, bueno, esas fueron todas expropiadas por la dimensión de la obra.
Entonces a mí lo que me preocupa es qué pasa con nuestras casas, tantas casas de tanta gente, que capaz que para otra persona no es valor, pero es lo único que tenemos. Acá casi todos tenemos una casa sola.
We were able to talk to one of those families whose home was destroyed to make way for the train.
Acá vivíamos nosotros, yo nací en esta casa que había acá antes. Me crié acá. Crié a mis hijos, mis nietos, estuvimos con mis padres, mis abuelos.
In August 2018, Nancy and Rodolfo received this letter from Uruguay's Ministry of Transport, saying that it was necessary to expropriate their property. But according to Nancy and Rodolfo, they're still waiting for financial compensation.
Yeah.
Yo no estoy contra el progreso.
But they should get paid for the land and the house.
Vamos a sacar la casa donde yo viví toda mi vida. Digo, y me dejas en la calle, no tiene sentido, ¿no? Antes había un parchero, más acá estaba el baño. Las ruinas.
En un basurero nomás. Qué horrible. ¿Qué fin tiene esto así?
This family's story isn't unique in Montevideo, and Uruguay's story isn't unique in the world. Other transnational wood pulp corporations have planted eucalyptus all over the world, in Indonesia, Mozambique, Brazil. These forests look similar, but exist in ecosystems whose only trait in common is that they're in countries where land is fertile, production is cheap, and wages are low compared to the global north. After a week in Uruguay, it was time for me to go. And going through customs at the Montevideo airport, I had to scan my fingerprint. And as we took off, I could see out of the plane window these forests I was leaving behind. This journey had taken us down a rabbit hole, from trying to understand one strange-looking forest to trying to understand an industry that had reshaped an entire country. These forests only exist because of the demands of the global economy. Uruguay doesn't need all of these forests, but the world, for every kind of paper, cardboard, and tissue product, does. While we were up north filming lumber trucks, I stopped on the side of the road to watch some leafcutter ants. They were all going one way empty-handed and the other way carrying leaves. They take the leaf cuttings back to their nest, built around a fungus. The ants feed the fungus leaves, and the fungus in return provides food for the ant larvae. These trees and trucks and mills and trains, they're all feeding something. Something that reshapes landscapes and lives. On its way to becoming something that we interact with every day.
Yeah, well, what can I say? First of all, I do gonna say I really like forests, but I'm learning with my life, like with the years of my life, that not every forest is the same. And I grew up in Poland, where we do have quite big forestry as well. Well, I never thought about it being big, but then I moved to Ireland and you don't really see that much forests here. Not forests that you can just enter, you know, freely without trespassing and all that. So I don't remember ever living in Poland not being about like 10 minutes away from forest. But now that I'm kind of thinking about some of them, like remembering how they looked, they weren't really forests, they were more like plantations as well. I even remember as a kid, I think I must have been 10 or 11 years old or something like that. My primary school were actually doing some planting of the trees on the street where I used to live, and those trees are, well, they grow now, because obviously that was 30 years ago. So they're big, and they, yeah, it's basically kind of shows time, how it changes everything. But with this situation here, it's kind of like reminds me when I was doing this kind of like a touristic tour around Ireland, like shortly after I moved to Ireland, and like, because you don't really, like I said, you don't really see that many forests, but they kind of are, but they are plantations as well. And the tour guide was saying that all those plantations are just, I think they were Norwegian, and because the pines are growing really, really fast in Ireland as well. So basically that's probably one of the reasons why they're here. But you can't enter them, and they really plant it really tight as well, so you wouldn't be even able to walk in there. Like the trees, I'm gonna try to find some pictures maybe from, if I have any pictures from Poland, kind of from forests and stuff. Yeah, let's see. I'm gonna kind of make some space here for it, so I can put some pictures here. I'm actually just gonna do full screen. I keep changing my mind. So I'm gonna try to put some pictures in there, but it just kind of like it's not fair to people that they you know, like they pretty much kicked them out from their house and they still haven't. This is from 2024, from last month, so they still haven't got any money. That's just not how that's supposed to work, because if people are not against it and the progress, it's needed, obviously all that pulp and stuff, it's needed as well for people as still, because what else is in there? Plastic then? There is no there's no halfway, because you either gonna use paper or you're gonna use plastic. So I think paper would be better in the outcome, because it's kind of like, you know, it's biodegradable and all that, but it's just the way how the paper is made. Like looking at that video, I didn't expect this to be about plantations of like trees just for a paper pulp. That kind of surprised me. And the reasons for planting it in the way how it is, it kind of surprised me as well, because like I said, I'm from Poland and there's quite a lot of plantations, like what you could say now, but they all are just roads. It doesn't matter what kind of, if it's going up and down, it's just, I never noticed anything being planted alongside the lines of elevation, just usually just like straight rows and stuff like that. But yeah, what else can I say? That was an interesting video as always from Vox, and well, I learned something new again, and I hope that those people that they lost their houses and they haven't been recompensated yet, they will after now, because this, well, hopefully they will. Now, thank you very much for watching. I see you tomorrow. Bye.